what happened. They got away with it several times.
How you doing?
Of course, the truck puts it in. First put it up, but it was that. Then it got wet. They said, "Let's go." Hit. Guess right. The young
That wolf, that wolf.
Oh,
There he is. You want me to?
Let's start. You all ready?
Right. We're
Ready?
almost.
Welcome to the August the 25th work session of the Elizabethtown City Council. And Tony Bishop will lead our invocation, please.
Let me pray. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the blessings that you bestowed upon us. We thank you for maybe some of the rain, but maybe not, maybe could have pulled back on it a little bit, but we thank you for that. We thank you for the sunshine and our employees that goes about the daily work that they do day in and day out. We ask that you watch over and keep them in your care. We ask that you be with all the sick and shut in, those families that are going through bereavement. Send your comforting angel around them. Be with us, guide us, and direct us. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
It's in the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You got started early, didn't you? I've got about 29.
Michael Phelps. No Michael Phelps. Well, then we'll go to Brett Minyard. You want to talk about swimming? Oh my gosh.
I broke my foot.
Oh, sorry.
No. No.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'll come see you. I'll come see you.
We kicked something.
Oh, it's turning on.
Man.
Well, my name is Britt Minyard, and I started out with the Learn to Swim program in 2005 when I was 16 years old. I started out as a lifeguard. Of course, the Learn to Swim program at that time was run by the American Red Cross. And since then, I've become a lifeguard instructor, a water safety instructor, and now I'm pretty much taking care of coordinating the program and everything else. So a quick history. Pat handed out the whole entire history to you guys in case you want to read over it, in case you're interested, of the City of Elizabethtown and the partnership with the American Red Cross and the Learn to Swim program. So in 1949, which was 65 years ago, the swim lessons started in the old Burnett Hotel right down the road, which is now Duplicator Sales. The pool had no water filter in it, and for 4 years they stayed that way until 1952, and that's when the City of Elizabethtown took over, and they said, hey, if you guys provide a wider array of swimming lessons and water safety lessons and lifeguarding classes, we will change the water out for you every Sunday night and refill the pool. So we stayed like that for 10 years until finally the American Legion pool opened in 1962. That was 52 years ago. So since then, the swimming lessons here in Elizabethtown that were provided by the American Red Cross have been a staple in our community up at the American Legion pool, which I'm sure you all know has been now torn down and is getting ready to be built or to have a new pool. So since then, we have had volunteers that have taken care of helping to teach lessons to all the children that come through our program every year, along with some paid staff. But in 2012, the American Red Cross made some changes, and they decided that they wanted to make all of the Red Crosses across the nation to be the same. So they walk in one office and they get the same information and the same programs as another office. And they felt that the local community Learn to Swim lessons were not needed to be provided by a local Red Cross office. So they told us to find businesses or authorized providers to take care of them and teach them instead of us. So I started looking for people and I could find nobody. So I talked to some of the people in town, couldn't find anybody. And finally they said, 1 year, we'll let you do it. Next year, you can't have them. So that year came and went, and the next year came about, and I begged and pleaded, and I called and bugged the lady up at our National Aquatics office, and finally she said, 1 more year. Your only stipulation is that you cannot have any paid staff. We don't have the money to take care of them. We can't put them on our payroll, so you're going to have to do it with nothing but volunteers. So that year we had 22 volunteers who worked 1,135 hours and taught 215 children to learn to swim. Fast forwarding to 2014, or coming into 2014, when we thought there was going to be no city pool, that was definitely going to be the end of our Learn to Swim lessons. We thought there was going to be nothing that we could do until about the November timeframe when we heard that there was going to be a new pool. And that's when I started talking to people saying, would you be willing to take over the swim lessons? Stuff like that. So luckily I got a hold of some people and were very interested in taking over the swim lessons here with the city, and they loved the idea. So this year was our first year with the city of Elizabethtown. We actually did the registrations at Pritchard. We had about 6 or 7 registration dates, and the first couple were kind of slow because people thought the pool was going to be closed. There was going to be no pool. But thanks to people who I know, since I'm still with the Red Cross, I was able to get free radio airtime to talk on the radio and try to get it out there on top of Facebook, getting the word out there that we were going to have lessons again this year, but they were going to be provided by the city of Elizabethtown. And luckily, that was a great thing because we had a really, really good turnout. We have volunteers that come back every year for this program, just for the Learn to Swim program, nothing else. Those volunteers are what make this program be such a success. And as we go through a couple more of these pictures, I'm pretty close to the last one, I will give you the stats of this year's Learn to Swim program. That's the last one. Those pictures are my favorite because you can actually see the kids. Oh, maybe it's not.
I like that one.
It's the same little boy, though. That one.
Oh.
Oh, come on. That's it. So for 2012, we had 221 children at $65 a child. We made a little over $14,000. We had 4 paid staff who worked 493 hours, and they totaled up to $7,216 in paychecks. And we had 17 volunteers who worked 778 hours. So we profited $7,149. For 2013, when they told us that we could not have a program unless it was strictly volunteer driven, we put through 215 children at $65 per child and made $13,000 and $13,975. We had 22 volunteers. They worked 1,135 hours.
So that was profit, $13,975.
Nothing
because
but
you had all
profit.
volunteers.
Because we had all volunteers.
Okay.
And this year, and it's kind of hard to see because the podium's in the way, We had 230 children at $65 again. Thanks, Seth.
Okay.
At $65 per child, we made $15,000. We had 9 paid staff who worked 473 hours, and it was $4,055.72 that they were all paid. We had 12 volunteers who worked 513 hours for a total profit of $10,944.28. So for this year, thanks to our paid staff and our volunteers, we had a very successful summer. We didn't have hardly any complaints. The biggest one was that the water was cold, and of course we can't help that. But because of you all who said yes to this wonderful program who helps this community and gives back to the children and makes sure that they know how to be safe in, on, and around water, we can continue this. So I want to say thank you to all of you who were helpful in this year. We all really appreciate it.
Brett, we want to thank you all very much. Charlie Bryant, do you want to talk about Meadow Lane? Yeah, unless Mr. Phelps has come in. This is not the Mr. Phelps who swims, right? Still not here, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Concerning Meadow Lane, if you recall a few weeks ago, Mr. Catlin came and spoke with you, with us about some kind of changes or maybe traffic calming on Meadow Lane. Bill directed us to take a closer look at it, get some more information. One of the things that we did is ask the police department to set up their equipment that can record a number of vehicles and the speeds, which I've given you that information in this memo as well. Hopefully we provided which interestingly enough showed that the speed was just barely under the average speed experienced there, was just barely under the 25 mile per hour speed limit. Our group, including Ed Hove and Scott Reynolds and Don Hill, the public works superintendent, as well as the chief, and I have all looked at the street and that section through there. We really are struggling with the idea of some type of traffic calming on that portion or on that street. We did look at it though in terms of pedestrian safety being related to the sidewalks and the availability of the sidewalks. And the sidewalks do need improvement. They are incomplete in some places. They're partially covered. Gravel in others. There's a lot of parking that goes on along the sides of the street that at times have the walks at least partially blocked. So I think a suggestion that we would have is that if the council wanted to do a sidewalk project, particularly in that block, that's something that would be appropriate, could be done without even interfering with the parking that goes on along there. And of course the parking, that type of parking is an issue that we have in a number of places in town, more so in older neighborhoods where there now is not enough, even 30 years ago there wasn't enough parking, and so they started developing their own parking along the edges of the pavement, and in most places that has created problems with walking along the area there and the drainage, because ditches have tended to be filled in either with insufficient piping or some places just filled in with gravel. So this is not unique to Meadow Lane. There are other areas that have this sort of problem. But maybe on Meadow Lane, it does seem to be that the sidewalks maybe are a little bit closer to the edge of the pavement, so the parking along there is interfering with the pedestrians trying to use the sidewalk. So as I was saying, that's a whole nother problem. So without saying we're going to have to change the parking on Meadow Lane, wanted to get in and try to do a sidewalk project, and one of the things that can be done is go in, rebuild the sidewalks, move back, like I said, a little 4 or 5 feet. So that's still pretty close to where the cars but probably for most areas it can be done without a lot of disruption to yards along there. Also, a few places where it gets a little bit tight, have to wiggle around a pole here and there. It looks feasible to do that. So our group sat and talked about this. And I think I'm expressing our feelings that we're not in favor of any type of traffic calming in particular, but do some sort of project to improve the sidewalk that
Well, I'll just to get the conversation started. I spent some time there Saturday, and 2 or 3 different times went through there and tried to observe and stuff. And I guess it might have been the times that I was there, but I saw no children in the streets, no children on the sidewalks. And it looked like the traffic was just normal traffic. I drove up the street northbound. I drove down the street southbound, and I tried to drive like I would normally drive. And to me, it was kind of hard to go more than 25 miles an hour. However, I do notice from the report that some people do, but I think that's everywhere. So anyway, I started thinking a little bit about it. So today I went back by there after school got out because I figured that would be a lot of time for the kids coming down from TK Stone, and there were a lot of kids coming down from Morningside and TK Stone. I agree with you. I think the sidewalks are in desperate need of repair. Knocked on some doors and talked to some families. Told them that we were going to be discussing this tonight, wondered what their thoughts were. Most people said, yes, speed is a problem. But then if you point out to them that the average speed is 24 miles an hour, then it was, well, maybe it's not that big of a problem. You know, the families that I talked to that had children, they said that they don't let their children in the streets, but sometimes kids run out in the street to get a ball or, you know, do whatever. They try and keep them on the sidewalks, which, going back to the sidewalks, if we had better and wider sidewalks, that along with the driveways, I think would keep some of the people out of the streets. I wondered if we could do some rumble strips maybe at each end, you know, just to grab attention from people that and not actually have a speed platform, and that's just a thought. I'm not against a speed platform. Just to me, it seems like that the protocol to set would be maybe to start with the least evasive or, you know, thing that you could do, and then just maybe gradual work your way up. You know, there's no signs that say children at play. Maybe that would help. Then I started thinking, too, as the school let out, when you go right on up to Morningside and look to the right, there's a flashing yellow sign that says school zone 15 miles per hour. I'm not sure that you couldn't classify the little street that comes down from Morningside Elementary. I'm not sure you couldn't classify that as a school zone because they're flooding out of that end of the school, walking down through there, and maybe have your caution lights there at school time that says school zone 15 miles an hour, the same way it is up on Morningside. I talked to families about whether or not they would like to stop the parking on the streets, and that was not an option. They have to have.
I ain't doing it.
You know, and I agree with them because they don't want to have the challenge of backing out on that street out of their driveways.
A lot of those driveways are pretty short as well.
Yeah.
You got 2 or 3 cars there. They don't.
So, I mean, those are just observations. I'm not saying any one of them should be an answer, but and I was talking to one lady at her house today, and I will tell you the fastest vehicle that came down that street was southbound, and it was a school bus. And that's not unusual to my neighborhood. The fastest traffic in my neighborhood is a school bus. And
Charlie, I'll agree with you know, the findings that you all did on the traffic through there. And I really don't think that speed is the problem. I think going through there, and I'm very familiar with that area. In fact, as a child, and I'm not how many years ago that was, I remember that Poplar Drive and Meadow Lane, I think, were one of the first sidewalks in the city of Elizabethtown, and they are desperately in need of repair. And whether or not that would take care of the problem or not, I'm not sure. But regardless of what we decide, I think that I would like to see a joint project that we improve those sidewalks because of the amount of pedestrian and school traffic in that area. Rumble strips, you know, I think you set a precedent when you do that, and we would have a request for those citywide, I think. So I would prefer that we look at other alternatives, but I am in favor of doing something on the sidewalks there.
Did they have vehicles back then?
Really not motorized. They
Yeah, by horseback.
but I do remember those as a child, and I grew up obviously not far from that neighborhood and played most of the time in that area. And those were, I almost remember that when we rode our skates, those were the only two areas, Poplar Drive and Meadow Lane, where you could, it was a good snow, back in those days when we had a snowfall, it was a good area to snow ride down that hill too.
You know, and I'm all for sidewalks getting improved.
I am.
But I think we all have seen, and Winchester Park is a prime example of that, we have good sidewalks and people still walk in the streets.
That's true.
We put sidewalks down Dixon, they're still walking in
That
the
is,
streets.
that is true.
Do that in our
I think we need to
neighborhood.
improve sidewalks, but I don't know that that's going
That
to be
does
our
anything with
catch-all
traffic.
solution
Yeah.
because they're still going to walk in the streets.
And that is a good, and I don't know why.
We have that
but
in our
is a good
neighborhood.
point.
People
Yeah.
just walk in
And
the
not only
street.
that, we meet with planning and development every year and go over all the things that needs to be done, and sidewalks and so forth. I mean, we've got places in town that doesn't even have sidewalks that we need to put in, much less ones that's not adequate. I mean, I understand that, yeah, they need to be repaired or replaced or whatever, but, you know, we've got places that there's no sidewalks that we
Exactly.
need to put sidewalks in. So I guess I'd have a hard time jumping this right ahead and saying we're going to do sidewalks on here where there's other places in town that really, really need sidewalks and we don't have them.
Charlie, I guess from my point of view that since my mother, sister, and niece live on that street, and I've been on that street several times, the sidewalks are in really bad shape. I think the sidewalks are a separate issue, though, from the traffic. Certainly the sidewalks need to be improved, but, you know, I've sat out there on the porch many times, and, you know, I've seen cars speed through there. There's no doubt, and even the research show that there are some cars that do 31 to 40 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. And the other concern was when school picks up, you've seen those cars go from about 1,800 to the school time about 3,500. So you give the percentages and the number of cars that are going 35 to 40, but just remember, folks, it's just that one time that can hit a child and harm them. And you're right that people still walk on the street. I don't doubt that at all. The other issue is that you know, planning committee talked with us about putting in traffic calming devices throughout the city in certain neighborhoods, and they had some money set aside for that and asked us if we would try that. I just think that Meadow Lane would be a prime site to try those traffic calming devices and see if it works. Even rumble strips, I think, would be a good alternative to nothing at all. And I agree with Mr. Shipp. He put some rumble strips up top and towards the bottom there, and when people hit that, they wake up and with some extra signs and see what happens. And if that doesn't work, I think the auto table or traffic table, we'd look at that and see if it works. Those were the recommendations from planning, and I think something needs to be done. Like I said, it just takes one accident, one child hurt, and then we'd be kicking ourselves saying, well, we should have done something about it. So.
The other thing I'll point out about, you know, that whatever type of methods that we might use, whether it's traffic calming tables, speed bump, one likes a speed bump, or rumble strips, you're going to have a priority issue if you start those, because there are a number of places. It's going to be like sidewalks. You're going to line up and say, what about us? So you're going to have to deal with that as long term if you begin that type of
Right.
device.
But we
I'm not
we
saying that you shouldn't, because you all as the council have the authority to make those decisions about traffic. Now, on the bigger scale, with the state, they try, that's why you always hear them talking about their warrants for traffic signals and all. They try to build their systems based upon engineering designs and criteria that are established, because obviously they have strong feelings that those things work, but also they're looking at the liabilities of all the use of the street as well as the devices themselves. But in the end, it is your all's decision. You can make that decision and direct whatever type of device that you want to use.
What do you think, Charlie, about the idea of having that classified as a school zone up there where that school lets out?
I think you probably could do that. I mean, at least that would be in effect during those typical hours for the students.
Well, as Bill mentioned, during school hours is when that traffic picks up on that road, so much.
But that's no different than North Miles. Government has to regulate things because people won't regulate their own actions and behaviors. North Miles, every morning I'm through there taking Dawson to school and coming back, and those lights are flashing, and they're flying through there. And it's almost like you have to have a police officer everywhere to regulate people's behavior. And while that's a great idea to create that as a school zone, they're still going to speed through it because some of them are going over speed limit with a speeding sign there.
Exactly.
So if they will disobey that speeding sign, they certainly are going to probably be disobeying the school zone sign.
I guess
mean,
the difference is that we've got elementary kids walking from that area. Some parents walk with them, but elementary kids will walk to the school there. And as you know, children don't always make the best decisions. And
adults don't either. And
yeah,
but we're going to have to. And I agree.
I mean, I'm
not
looking at
against
the
anything
children,
out there. I'm
yeah.
just saying, whatever we come up with is not going to be 100% foolproof because we're still talking about people making poor choices and bad decisions.
Well, I just wondered, based on the conversation we've had, and we've had a traffic report, and as you can see, Mr. Catlett, we're not going to decide anything for you because 6 of us couldn't agree on anything. After the discussion that you've heard and this, and we've talked about sidewalks, we've talked about calming things and things like that, what's your feeling now after it's been studied? And Matt, I'd like to get...
Well, firstly, thank you very much for listening so well last time and taking me seriously. And I want to be clear that I don't see myself in opposition to you. I find it impossible to believe that we don't believe about kids, that kids need to be safe. I find it impossible to believe that any of you guys think kids should be in danger. I also find it impossible to believe that anyone would want to hamper response times in any way, shape, or fashion. We're dealing with probabilities, we're dealing with percentages, and we go with our gut feelings on this. So my thoughts, as we all work this out together, because again, I want to stress I'm not contrarian. I'm not trying to be contrary in any way. I want to refocus on the kids again. The fact that there are so many kids and still some new faces that I see walking on the street. There's 3 girls that are walking down the street now that I've never seen before. I can only assume they moved to one of the adjacent streets. 30 kids in 2/10 of a mile, 0.20 miles between the stop signs, my little stretch of Meadow Lane. 30 kids. I'm not counting the ones on the adjacent streets that go through there. So I see us dealing with percentages and probabilities. Is it going to hamper response times? Should someone need some help? My neighbors have died on either side of me. An ambulance came both times for either of those, so it's a very real thing for me. The neighborhood only has 2 houses in it now that are what they're getting up there. I want to be careful about what I call old. I have one couple across the street from me, they're in their 60s, and then some that are definitely in their late 70s, early 80s. They are a higher probability of needing an ambulance than anyone else would. Do I want to hamper the response times to them by putting in a big speed platform? Not necessarily. That is not the only solution for me, is a big speed platform to slow things down. But if we're dealing with, the theoretical versus the actual, every day it is already acknowledged that there are at least 8% speeding. If we're going to take the sample of what we have, 7% are going 31 to 40 over. A 1% is doing, I don't know, they're really dangerous, need to have their license taken away, 40 and above. What percentage, if there's just a different way of looking at this, what percentage is necessary in order for us to protect the children from any danger? Right now they're in danger every day as they walk home. That's been acknowledged because they're speeding on the road. The speeding is supposed to be 25 and below the speed is. Anything above that is considered unsafe. The kids are walking on the road. They don't have their lobes developed properly yet to make good judgment. The danger is real in that case, and we acknowledge that. Yeah.
But I think what Mr. Fulkerson was saying is people speed everywhere.
They do, and let me say this.
Not only Meadow Lane. I mean, they speed everywhere.
Well, the kids, again.
I mean, there's kids everywhere, too, though.
Well, I challenge you to find 30 kids in 2/10 of a mile.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I want to go to Longhorn.
Okay.
Westport Road.
But is it a cut through? Because this is a cut through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly.
Okay. So maybe it's time to open the wallets. I don't know. But anyway, we acknowledge it's a school zone and that it's an issue. And since we've acknowledged that, we need to do something. I really like the idea of the treating that side of the street as a school zone. I love the idea of a rumble strip because it causes people to pay attention to the control devices already there, being the signs saying 25 miles per hour, please slow down, and the flashing lights. So I like that a lot. I would also say, though, I only feel about the traffic study because wherever you go, the majority of the people are doing the speed limit, and you're going to get an average about at the speed limit. If you go out here in front of the mall.
And I think the chief's shaking his head no, too.
Yeah. You're trying to tell me that
the
the
facts
averages
don't
into the 50s in front of the mall?
I'm not trying to tell you that of any speed. I will tell you the areas we run these things and speed is above.
So what is the percentage that causes the city to act?
Well, that depends on, all the circumstances surrounding it. I can't answer for council how they do it. It's not a big decision. I will tell you that typically the state will do studies, maybe the percentile of the decision relates to the amount of speed that they set at a particular street intersection. And then, of course, they involve the other considerations, residential, physical.
Do we have a comparable situation?
Charlie, do we have any parameters set, or is this just something that depends on do we have parameters like the state for setting up calming devices or traffic control?
No, because the city really never has established a policy for traffic calming. And again, as you alluded to, there's been some discussion now with the Planning Commission and their desire maybe to try some of these types of measures, and there are different things that have been tried all over the country, but no, we haven't developed any criteria for it. The city in the past has always just tried to control it with speed limits and police patrols, and I think we've gotten away from it a little bit more, but kind of the reason I think that way back, and maybe Ron can remember this, there were a lot of four-way stops.
I agree.
So,
yes.
And hitch and post?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I just have to say I love the idea about the sidewalks, and I think that's I'm glad you agree with me about the sidewalks. I would hope the sidewalks would work out. The only problem with the sidewalks is that you're going to take as in the proposal, you're going to take another 4 feet away from somebody's already tiny yard.
Do you think if the sidewalks were improved and we could figure out a way to keep the cars from parking
On the sidewalk.
Well, I think
that the children would use the sidewalks as opposed to being in the street?
I do. I know my kids. I think the fact that the cars are parking on the sidewalks it's co-joined with the fact that they're dilapidated and nobody uses them. They park on them because they're dilapidated and they know that no one uses them. Now, I totally see them parking on the street, and I can probably see maybe a tire easing up on the sidewalk at some time, but I know my neighbors fairly well. Like I say, I know them in and out, but fairly well enough to know that I know that if there's a good sidewalk there, they're going to tell their kids to use the sidewalk anyway. And again, kids' judgment's not always the best, but that's another thing that helps.
But I don't know that we're constructing sidewalks to handle the pressures of cars sitting on them, are we?
Well, we're trying to encourage the kids to stay out of traffic,
We're,
right?
yeah, we're not.
4 inches.
So what happens is if we go and put sidewalks on and people start parking those cars on, they're going to tear those up too. Those are going to become dilapidated too.
I
That's one of
have
the
no
issues
response
with
to
those.
that.
Yeah.
That's not something I can.
Well, let me ask you, has there ever been a child hit over there by a car? Have we ever had an accident like that?
I've lived there 8 years, and all I've seen are close calls.
I don't remember that being that many children ever on that street. That's quite a bit.
First 1970, and I don't recall a child ever.
So we haven't
Well, there
had
didn't
any
used to
accidents.
be kids.
So we haven't had any accidents. The speed is relatively where we want it to be. So basically, there's just a potential of a problem there, and that's what we're talking about.
Well, I think that since we acknowledge that there's at least 8% that are speeding in what I would just call unsafe. You know, everybody does 5 over, right?
But I guess the point I'm going to make
Everybody does
is
5 over. So, I mean, the danger for people, I mean, the danger is real because the kids use the street as acknowledged,
Right.
and people speed as acknowledged.
But I
So the
guess
danger is real.
the point I'm going to make is that we've got that all over the city. It's not just right there on Meadow Lane.
But
We've
it's the
got that
fact-
in numerous areas.
Well,
I mean, we
again,
just had 2 people hit right up here on North Miles Street. They're across from Domino's Pizza in that area.
well, danger in one area doesn't negate the necessity of help in another.
Oh, I
so-
agree 100%. But I'm just saying that, you know, we've got problems all over the city as far as a potential problem for children and things like that. And I agree with Charlie. I mean, we're going to really open up the door here if we just do something on Meadow Lane.
I think the fact that it's protected, I think that the fact that we can call this a school zone protects the slippery slope that you're talking about. And I'm not in your position, so I can't say that with full authority, of course. You run to this more than I do.
But we have a
But
lot
I
of people
think-
that come to us and want us to put some kind of
Calming
speed
device.
calming
Yes.
devices on their road. We get that a lot.
Oh, I
And
absolutely.
if we go with every one, we're going to have them on every street in E-Town.
Well, that's why you're on the council, so I'll leave that to you to make these decisions, and I make the case to say that the
And I
fact that
appreciate
we're
you doing it. I appreciate
well,
you
the
doing
fact
it.
that
but
we
I'm
have
just-
so many kids in this section, and the fact that I live there and see it all the time, just like Mr. Bennett does, as opposed to a couple of speed studies who see it. In your position, I would think, oh, he's hypersensitive because he lives there. Oh, he's hypersensitive because his kids can get hurt. I can't attest to the truth of that or the falseness of that. My perception is what it is. But we know that there's a bunch of kids there. We know it's right by the school. We know that the kids use it. If I were in your shoes, I would absolutely say, yes, I know that we did that on Meadow Lane, but we've got a school right there. You can see it. All the houses can see it right there. And that's why this is a separate situation from your street. That's not where a school is. That is my retort. But
And that didn't used to be an issue because that used to be an elderly
it
neighborhood.
used to be, when I moved in, my street was 60 and 70 years old. It was the most quiet. I mean, you still had the speeders, and then I could talk to my neighbors about them. But as far as I stayed well fed, and everyone's lawn looked immaculate, and I had the nicest conversations with all my elderly neighbors. But they've moved out and on to other places, and the younger couples have bought them up. And again, I only have 2 houses of people, and I don't know, I know who they are, but again, one of them wouldn't come to the door because he said no soliciting, and the other one was sticking in the hospital, so I didn't get a chance to talk to her. But guys, thank you so much for hearing my case. Thank you. I'm glad we could discuss it respectfully, and I could obviously tell that you're taking it seriously. If you want me to go on the record as saying something, I'm a big fan of making it a school zone with a flashing yellow light. I'm a huge fan of rumble strips to get people to pay attention. I don't have to have, I'm not asking you do a speed table or you failed Meadow Lane or anything like that, but something to make the kids safer, because again, that is the crux of my argument, is I don't feel our kids are safe enough in this area, and I'm asking you to address that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Carrollton Road in North Miles, Charlie Bryant.
Another traffic issue.
Yeah.
Did you all get to look at the revised plan that the state traffic engineers has proposed? Got out there with them, looked at it. think it could work that way. It's a lot better on their proposed drawing. Let's see what you think. One of the things that I think I mentioned too in the memo is that they indicated they'd be willing to go out there and kind of sketch it out on the pavement, so we can take a look at it, see if we feel that.
To me, that's a safe thing to do, and that's not permanent, you're saying? Yeah.
Who requested this to begin? Who started this to begin with?
The original person that asked me about it was
Bob Hicks.
Okay. Because again, I've really noticed every time I've been out there, I haven't
Most
seen a
people are
problem.
turning right.
No.
There's very little left turns.
I've got to say
No.
too, and that's kind of the reason I kind of brought it back up. I didn't like the jog over, and then I looked at the revised, and yeah, the revised would be better, but I keep coming back to what Mr. Lewis is saying. I didn't know there was a problem.
It's certainly
And
not
if
the biggest
only
one.
5% of the people turn left anyway,
Everybody's clearing out of there. Nobody is getting held up either way from a cycle of the light. If you want to do an improvement, put a turning light on there for North Miles, whether you can go left or right on French or
Yeah.
Orchard. If you want to make an improvement, that's where the hangup is somebody trying to cut across. If you're coming down North Miles needing to turn on to, say, French Street, that's backing up. But French and Pear Orchard, getting out of there is not backing up on any cycles of lights during school time or rush hour or any of that. So.
And I think
Most
the
people are
temporary
turning
things.
right.
The bottom line might be, though, and I don't know that I think the state wants to do what you all would like to be in agreement with. But
That's the first time we've asked them to do some others they didn't want to do, but that's good.
in the end, they control the intersection as they originally set it up, so they can change it if, I guess they have the authority to change it if they want.
I like the traffic pattern just the way it is right now.
I don't have a problem with it.
That's what I'll let them know.
I don't have a problem.
I mean, unless somebody else is,
There's
stuck
three
on
other
it.
places where I can name where their backups are far greater than that.
Anything else?
Is this Mr.?
He's not.
It's not him.
Oh, is it?
No.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
no,
Okay,
no.
American Engineer.
Okay. They're here for
Yes.
money.
If I may,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Phelps not here from the court, but I'd like to let you all know what we did, and maybe that's why he's not here. There was a pretty serious parking problem on Cumberland Court, parking on both sides of the road. In fact, 3 or 4 times.
Can you tell the council where that is?
Okay,
Some
Cumberland
people
Court,
didn't know.
thank you. Cumberland Court is off North Black Branch Road, which runs behind Central Arden. It's a small street that leads into a cul-de-sac. Right on Black Branch Road, there's an 8-plex apartment that is on the corner of Cumberland Court and North Black Branch. And that was part of the problem. Mark Malone and I went out there a total of 4 times, and most of the time, about 3 of the times, there was only 10 foot of clearance to get into that cul-de-sac, which is not acceptable in any way. So it's totally outside of code. So we drafted a letter to all the residents of the apartment building and all the residents on Cumberland Court, asking them not to park on the street, explaining the problem, how it would restrict emergency response. I've checked it twice, yesterday and today since then, and there's only 1 vehicle on the street. So hopefully, in our letter, we addressed them, asked them, explained the problem, and asked them not to park on the street, and that we did not want to take further actions that would be more restrictive in doing so. So hopefully that solved the problem.
And you've talked to him, Charlie?
I talked to Mr. Phelps, yes.
Okay.
Not since we sent the letter out, but I talked to him prior. He called the office
Okay.
and got us involved and asked us to come down. But there was a pretty severe problem of gaining access into that cul-de-sac. Thank you, ma'am.
Mayor, I'd like to say something about detention basins. I've been kind of critical of detention basins because it seems like we have so many of them, and I've talked to Robert Bush 2 or 3 times about that issue, and I'll mention it because everybody on this council, from here on down, were part of putting the detention basin in behind my house. And during that, I ended up with a concrete ditch in my backyard, which I don't really particularly care for. But in any event, I let you all do what you all were supposed to do. So,
But it works though.
Did we
anyway,
not pay you?
Saturday night, and then this detention basin, guys, they put this detention basin in. It's about 4 acres and it's about 20 foot deep. You could put an underground parking structure in this thing. It's huge. Saturday night, it filled up within an hour. I mean, completely filled up to the brim. And every bit of that would have been in my backyard. So I guess now I'm really happy that I've got a detention basin in my backyard, because I remember when I was flooded before and it was a disaster.
We knew that.
So
when
in
we made
any
that
event,
decision.
you all knew that
We knew
I
that.
made
We-
the motion to do that.
Well,
you knew
I made
that
the motion.
that I was going to get 5 inches of rain
Yeah.
in an hour, and that's what we got at my house. We got about, and Winchester Park just got socked. But in any event, we walked up on the dam and had a flashlight, and it was filled up. I mean, completely. Couldn't hardly take any more, but it did handle it all. None of it came over the dam, and it released out. And the next morning, there was no water in the basin, so
You
it
want
worked
that
perfect.
detention basin over on St. James, and
It was.
that was
Was
a,
it full?
that
It
that
was
was a
full.
saver. That
It
was
was
a
full.
saver for that neighborhood.
Terry, since you're happy with that, does that mean you're going to vote for us come November?
I'm still considering some of that.
Captain Stormwater would be glad to hear
Yeah,
you say that. He's
Well,
not
I
here.
will make sure and tell him. I was hoping he'd be here tonight, but
He's at the beach.
He's at the beach. Another water.
in any event, I stayed dry and my yard stayed dry. And matter of fact, Sunday afternoon, I was able to mow my yard. So, I mean, it just worked perfect. So
Just one of the few many things that I've done to help you out.
thank you, Kenny. I knew it was.
So if
Don't
you're going
forget-
away, Gift will get your retention basin model.
Might as well say, don't forget the auction. Might as
Yeah,
well,
Thursday.
we don't want to forget the auction Thursday night.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, 6 o'clock. Right behind that detention basin, right?
We got a parking lot party. I see someone back there, the wolf is holding it up, so Friday, August 29th.
Great, we got free food from Colton Steakhouse, giving away prizes every 15 minutes through their 11. It'll be a great event.
Are they like 8x10 glossies of the music provided by? Are the 8x10 glossies of the one providing the music?
Who is that?
Is he providing the music?
Oh.
Providing music.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Charlie, I wish Mr. Catlett was here. And then I don't think you were there. Bobby Tab might remember, but I can remember when there was a huge lake behind
Yeah, there was the lake.
Meadow Lane behind the Baptist church. You remember that, Charlie?
Swallowed up.
Bobby remembers it, called Carol.